Burnaby Campus. This is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good morning. You're listening to 1680 The Crow. I'm Jocelyn Chappelle with your 10 a.m. news headlines. In a statement released Friday, BC Hydro says the province experienced a record high power demand on Friday. The demand reached 11,300 megawatts, beating the previous record set last year of almost 1,100 megawatts. BC's Energy Minister Josie Osborne says that during the cold snap, BC has been able to meet the province's needs. The change in weather has also affected nearby businesses and homes as well. A pipe malfunction at YVR caused flooding on Friday. Mission Memorial Hospital also had a pipe burst and has been diverting emergency patients to Abbotsford and Maple Ridge hospitals. Residents at a Surrey senior care home were also displaced when they were evacuated this weekend after pipes burst and a heating system failure. An emergency alert was issued Saturday night in Alberta for consumers to conserve power. A spokesperson for Alberta Electric Systems Operator says consumers responded instantly, with consumption dropping 100 megawatts within seconds of the alert being sent out and an additional 100 a few minutes later. In light of the alert, debates have been heating up over Alberta's energy grid. Premiers like Daniel Smith and Scott Moe have claimed on social media that the recent events show renewables cannot be trusted when temperatures plunge. On the other hand, a spokesperson in Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault's office said the government is making provisions so fossil fuel burning plants can run without carbon capture technologies during peak use or emergency situations. A Nova Scotia Supreme Court judge has ruled it illegal to lock down any inmates because of staffing shortages. Keith Duquette with the Canadian Press describes what happened prior to the decision.
Justice Peter Rosinski found that inmates Darrell Diggs and Ryan Wilband experienced ongoing material deprivation of their liberty while incarcerated at the Central Nova Scotia Correctional Facility last fall. The judge says Diggs was detained at the jail for 51 days. On 38 of those days, he was confined to a cell for 22 hours per day. Under full staffing, inmates should be safely out of their cells for up to 12 hours a day. Rosinski suggests better planning to ensure full staffing, distributing inmates throughout the provincial system, and using bail and temporary absence leaves as ways of dealing with persistent staff shortages. Keith Doucette, the Canadian Press, Halifax.
This morning, a volcano in southwestern Iceland has erupted for the second time this month. Charles DeLesma has more on the ongoing situation.
Aerial footage captures the sound of flowing lava reaching the evacuated town of Grindavik. Scientists say the eruption appears to be dying down, but it's too soon to declare the danger over. Later on Monday, a second fissure opened near the edge of town, setting houses on fire. Nature photographer Jeroen van Nieuwenhof says he's shocked the lava's reached this area.
It's a bit of a weird feeling to see a town being destroyed almost in slow motion at this point. It's difficult to put it in words what I'm feeling right now. I'm very sad about what's going on.
Iceland's president says the country's battling tremendous forces of nature after the molten lava consumed parts of Grindavik. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
100 days since the October 7th attack, the United Nations has issued a warning about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Rita Foley with the Canadian Press has more.
It's being called an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. The UN says Israel's war against Hamas has displaced most of the millions who live in Gaza and pushed more than a quarter of them into starvation. Authorities there say more than 24,000 people have died. The White House says it's time for Israel to scale back its military offensive. But Israel blames Hamas for the high death toll, saying its fighters use civilian buildings and launch attacks from highly populated urban areas. Israel began its offensive when Hamas attacked it on October 7th, killing 1,200 people and taking hundreds of hostages. I'm Rita Foley.
Those have been your 10 a.m. news headlines. I'm Jocelyn Chappelle. Thanks for tuning in to BCIT The Crow.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see. Vancouver is growing.
This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
I'm Nicholas Hauka, and this is the Fall Off Podcast. In this podcast, we discuss players, teams, and coaches who seemingly had a very bright future ahead of them, but against all odds, never lived up to the hype. We discuss how they became household names, excelled at one point of their careers, and then the inevitable fall off. Over the next 3 weeks, I will be talking about arguably one of the greatest college quarterbacks and Oregon Ducks players of all time, Heisman-winning quarterback Marcus Mariota, who led the Ducks to a national championship game and was taken second overall by the Tennessee Titans in the 2015 NFL Draft. But shortly after, the fall-off began. It's 2015 in Chicago, Illinois. Day one of the NFL Draft is about to start. In the green room is Jameis Winston. Winston has always been highly touted, being a 4-star prospect coming out of high school, and after a prominent career at Florida State, is hoping to be selected number 1. Sitting next to him is Marcus Mariota. Mariota was almost an afterthought of the same recruiting class coming out of high school, only having 4 FBS offers. Despite that, Mariota is right next to Winston, and after what he accomplished in his last 3 seasons with Oregon, has just as much of a chance to go number 1. Who will go first? Who will go second? And how did Mariota defy the odds to get here? Rewind to late 2011 in Eugene, Oregon. The Oregon Ducks football program is riding as high as it ever has been. Under head coach Chip Kelly, Oregon is having its greatest run in program history. Finishing the previous season 12-2 and without a devastating loss to rival USC late in the year would have been right back in the national championship game, just like the previous season.
Maldonado on the way, pulled it left, no good. USC upsets Oregon.
Hoping to continue their newfound dominance in the 2012 season, seemingly out of nowhere, Darren Thomas, starting quarterback for the Ducks, declares for the 2012 draft. Ducks and college football fans are shocked, as despite having 2 wonderful seasons for the team, he wasn't seen as pro-ready. What Ducks fans were unaware of was how much pressure Mariota was putting on Thomas during practice. Farhan Lalji from TSN, who covered that Rose Bowl game, had some insight on what was occurring during that time.
But when they got into bowl prep that year, he was making a real name for himself. And just during that bowl prep period, while Thomas was still the quarterback, you knew that there was going to be a battle the following year for sure. And, I'm sure that if the portal was available like it is now, Thomas wouldn't have declared. He probably would have just gone elsewhere.
For most fans not privy to this information, the mystery behind that baffling draft declaration would be solved the second the college football season would start. With Thomas moving on, Brian Bennett seems to be the shoe-in starter going forward. During the season, Bennett backed up Thomas and exceeded expectations whenever he filled in due to injury or late in games during a blowout victory. However, a little-known 2-star QB recruit out of St. Louis High School in Hawaii was about to make a big impression. Marcus Mariota looks to steal the starting job from Bennett in his second season as a redshirt freshman with the Ducks. After impressing coaches and players alike during training camp, on August 24th, 2012, the Oregon Ducks announced that Mariota had officially won the starting position, beating out Bennett. It's September 1st, 2012. Oregon is playing Arkansas State in their season opener.
Marcus now to the end zone. Great throw. I mean, this is just getting silly.
Marcus Mariota throws 18 completions on 22 attempts and 300 yards, impressing the Ducks coaching staff and fans alike with his poise, accuracy, and decision-making. Gord Randall, TSN scout, with more.
Wow, yeah. I remember watching some of those early starts from Mariota, and one of the things that stood out was his movement skills at his size. Like, he was already 6'3" and change. Chip Kelly already had a reputation for having a pretty quarterback-friendly offensive system. So they were running a bunch of that spread option stuff. Mariota was clearly immediately a weapon with his legs.
Mariota went on to not throw an interception until week 3 and led the Ducks to a 12-1 record. Mariota finished the 2012 season with a completion percentage of 68.5%, 2,677 yards throwing, 752 rushing yards on the ground, and 32 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions.
And then that freshman year blows the doors off of everybody, and the sky appears to be the limit. And so, Oregon was a trendy pick for the national championship that year, and from the outset, that was the bar that was set for that Ducks team.
Following his first year as a starter, Mariota looks to put up even better numbers in his second year, which he would do in his sophomore campaign, throwing for 34 touchdowns to 4 interceptions with 3,665 yards total, while leading Oregon to an 11-2 record. Despite the success of his first 2 seasons, the biggest knock against Mariota and the Ducks was they could never win the big game against their conference rivals, always being 1 game away from the national championship before suffering a heartbreaking defeat to eliminate them from contention. Going into his junior year, Mariota and the Ducks were determined to switch the narrative. Heading into Week 9 of the 2014 season, the Ducks had an 8-1 record after having a lone hiccup on a Friday night game against Arizona. Now, the biggest game of the year so far, facing a bitter rival in the Stanford Cardinal, who had Oregon's number the past 2 seasons.